This is what my culture has taught me the most about eating.
I'm Dr. Nadia, and welcome to my podcast. I'm a naturopathic doctor, co-author of the PCOS Plan, and I've spent more than 20 years helping people better understand metabolic health, hormones, and weight. This podcast is about helping you fight smarter, not harder. It's about looking at symptoms as signs, not judgments. We'll talk about metabolism, menopause, insulin resistance, obesity, PMOS, therapeutic eating, hormones, medications, and the science behind why our bodies do what they do.
So I'm about 80% Portuguese, and the other 20% is a mixture of African heritage, with a little bit of Middle Eastern heritage, and a tiny little bit of Northern European heritage. But I grew up culturally Portuguese. My family on my mother's side is Portuguese from Mozambique, so Portuguese descendants from Mozambique. And I grew up in Canada. So I had a really good exposure, I think, to different cultures. My side of the family that's from Mozambique. So Mozambique is a country that has a lot of food influences from all over the world. A lot of Portuguese influence, of course, and a lot of Indian influence, a lot of Chinese influence, and a little bit of Arab influence as well. So when I look at all these different examples of eating, one thing that I realized when I started helping people to lose weight, or when I started helping people with therapeutic eating, was that a lot of the things that I was teaching people or learning to teach people, a lot of the things that I realized were very helpful to people when it came to therapeutic eating were things that I now realize I had learned from my culture. There are quite a few things that people in Portugal and a lot of European countries do that is reflected in the way that I teach people how to eat in therapeutic eating. One of the big ones is plating. I taught people a strategy that I now call plating. And this is the strategy where I tell people to sit to eat and to set the table and to put all the foods that they want to eat on a plate or around a plate. And before they start eating, they should be sitting at a table in front of a plate. And this is something that for a lot of people in North America seems like a new thing, or sort of like I am reinventing the wheel or coming up with some trendy way or new age way of eating. But this idea of plating, sitting at a table, eating in front of a plate, eating from a plate, not eating from a cupboard, from a fridge, from a package, not eating in front of the TV, not eating while they're working, while they're driving. This is something that culturally, in many cultures, not just my culture, but many cultures, this is the normal way of eating. So this is one of the ways that I'm helping people to reset to a more traditional way of eating. And this makes a significant difference in the way that you eat, in the things that you eat, what you eat, because when you're actually sitting in front of a table, when you're actually taking the time to set the table, to put the food on a plate, as opposed to just eating mindlessly, this gives you an opportunity to create better meals. This is one of the many things that I realized from my culture, that I was able to teach people and remind people that this is the way that we are supposed to eat. And this makes a huge difference. Another thing from my Portuguese culture that I've realized is quite helpful, and it's something that I use every single day to teach people in therapeutic eating, is the food order. So food order matters. And this is something that I started to realize once I started to read all of the books about it. And again, seems like a new way of eating, a new thing to tell people how to eat and how to start their meals and how to end their meals. This is something that many cultures all over the world do, not just in the Portuguese culture, but in many other cultures in Europe and all over the world. A lot of cultures start their meal with high fiber foods first. For example, in Portugal, most people start their meal either with a soup, a high fiber soup, or a high fiber salad. In countries like Italy, people start with the antipasti first. We often think of Italian food, we think pasta, or we think of Chinese food and we think rice. But in these cultures, these traditional cultures, people still to this day start their meal with, for example, the Italians start with an antipasti, then the meat, then the pasta. So they have several courses, but traditionally they start with an antipasti, which tends to be usually a high fiber food, and then their protein, and only after that do they eat their carbs. And in a lot of parts in China, they do this as well. They'll eat their vegetables and their protein first, their meats first, and they'll leave the rice for the very end of the meal or towards the end of the meal. Another thing that you hear a lot about now is this idea of eating real food, whole food, one ingredient food, as if this, again, was a new age thing. You go to these trendy shops like Whole Foods and you buy all this expensive food. But the idea of whole foods, the idea of bringing back to eating whole foods comes from the way that we have always eaten, as before industrialization, have always eaten, before foods started to become ultra processed and became these things that we now call food. Before that, every single person ate whole, real, one ingredient foods that they actually had to cook and make their own sauces from these one ingredient foods, as opposed to buying a sauce from a bottle. Way before these sauces were ultra processed and made into these things that we call food, that have a list of long ingredients, hundreds of things that we don't even recognize, with all the flavorings and all the sweeteners and the various types of modified sugars. People used to make their own sauces and still make their own sauces all over the world. So this is something that I think is that people don't realize, how detrimental to your meal is when you add these sauces and highly palatable things to your meals. Maybe you are consuming some whole foods, some one ingredient foods. Maybe you are cooking your meals, but then you're adding these, most often these sauces that have a long list of ingredients, a whole bunch of ultra processed modified foods to become these things. And so when you look back at the more traditional cultures like mine, Portuguese people make their own salad dressing with just olive oil, vinegar, and salt most of the time. A lot of other cultures do the same. So salad dressings, that's a big one. That's something that you can easily make. It takes a little bit of time, but you can easily make with 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients if you'd like. Things like tomato sauce. Again, the Italian grandmothers are making the tomato sauce from one whole ingredient foods, but you're buying it in a jar or can, and it's got a whole bunch of added chemicals, trans fats, flavorings. So my culture has taught me a whole lot, and it's actually increased my interest in learning about other cultures and how people still eat all over the world. And when you compare these different cultures and the way that they now eat, you can easily see how it has negatively impacted on people's health, starting from childhood, of eating these ultra processed things, when if you go back just a generation or two, people were eating whole one ingredient foods. And so in my culture, in Portugal, I still see people eat mostly whole foods, one ingredient foods. I still see people mostly eating their meals while they're sitting at a table in front of a plate. I still see that people start their meals with the lower insulin producing foods, like the high fiber foods and the protein with some natural fats first, and they leave the more palatable, higher sugar things towards the end of the meal.